name is Sharon Sherry, your host for this chat. It is my absolute pleasure today to be holding an ARRA author chat with none other than Nalini Singh. A New York Times and USA Today best-selling author, she's passionate about writing. Though she's travelled as far afield as the deserts of China and the highlands of Scotland and the temples of Japan, it's the journey of the imagination that fascinates Nalini the most. She's beyond delighted to be able to follow her dream as a writer, and she lives and works in beautiful New Zealand. Thank you for joining us, Nalini. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with you tonight.
It's great to be here.
Now, Nalini, for those viewers who don't already know it, and you have a great fan base at the Australian Romance Readers Association, and indeed a fair few friends of mine as well, would you please tell us about your early journey towards publication, because you didn't always write these paranormal romances with such amazing world building in them?
No, I originally started out writing for Harlequin, or Mills and Boon. I started writing very young, and I tried to write my first sort of full-length book, Mills and Boon, when I was 18. And I think it was because I was reading those books and really enjoying them, so I thought, that's what I want to write. But at the same time, I was also always writing science fiction or fantasy type stuff, and so them all coming together in my paranormal romances was kind of natural. But yeah, when I started out, I was first published by Harlequin after sending them many books and getting rejected. And then yeah, I got published and just kept going and kept writing those books and doing my paranormal stuff on the side until eventually I, had Slave to Sensation, and that was, I just knew, that this was the book that had the right paranormal elements and the romance and everything meshed together really well. And yeah, and so I went out on submission with that to agencies, and my agent in Italy really loved it, and yeah, went from there.
Great. Now, before we get into series-specific questions, I just wanted to ask you how easy or hard has it been to create two such different but intricately detailed worlds as the Guild Hunter world and the Changeling world?
As a writer, I knew I had a strong idea because when for the two series question, I knew it was a strong idea for the Guild Hunter series because it was so different from the Changeling series. For me as a writer, it was really interesting to write something so different, and I felt that was really important because I didn't want to be writing the same things, in two different series. In terms of how to build those different worlds, I'm really an instinctive writer, so it's not like I sit down and sort of work out all the world building or anything in advance. I just write the book and go with my characters and see what they tell me. But what I do, which I feel is very important, is I maintain continuity, a continuity Bible for each series. So basically all the details are listed because I think that's what really makes a strong series, when all the little tiny details add up. So if someone goes back to the start of the Changing series and they read through, there's a number of sort of Easter eggs kind of thing, hidden in there, or things that will make more sense, if you go back and read it. And I think if you're writing an interlinked series like I do, where each book stands alone but also there's an overarching storyline, I think it's important to have those detail links. That's what makes it interesting as the series continues, and makes it interesting for readers who want to reread the books as well. And I love doing it like that. So yeah, but it does take a lot of work. A lot of like today I was checking the color of someone's wings, and I went back through 3 books because I had it in my head, but I have to double check just in case I might have changed it in a draft. So I always double check against the final book, which is what readers would have read. Yeah.
It's funny how they pick them up. Some of the really obscure, almost throwaway lines in your earlier books, because I've reread everything, they come back way into the future. Sahara Kyriakis being one example. She was mentioned very, very early, and suddenly in Heart of Obsidian, she's back.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Sometimes, I know, at that moment. The moment a character appears, I'm like, oh. So at that time, so that was, I think, 7 years ago. Was it 6 years ago? Something like that. I actually wrote the first chapter of Heart of Obsidian at that time when Sahara first appeared in the book. So, I always knew who she was, who she was going to be, and who she was, obviously, to Caleb. So, yeah, when it happens like that, it's magical, And sometimes, though, it's instinct. I'll put something in there and I won't even think about it very much, but then later on it's the perfect thing to make the story work. So I think it's the subconscious is also working on the story the whole time, and so when it tells me to put something in, I put it in.
It's great, and writers and very strong writers always talk about their characters speaking to them, yelling at them sometimes. So I'm going to move on now to the Changeling series, and I've got some questions from myself, from friends, and a few of our members.
Okay.
Shield of Winter is obviously the next eagerly awaited book out for you. It's number 14, I think, in the Changeling series.
13.
13. And we've got Vasek and a new empath that we haven't met who is going to be his mate. Was it, did you have to work extra hard to find the perfect mate for him, or did she just kind of appear?
I knew, again, it was like Heart of Obsidian. I have had the first chapter of this book written for a long time. I always knew who his mate was going to be, so, and I even had, the opening scenes in terms of how he would meet her and everything. Obviously, it changes, when I redraft, but the basic gist of it was there. So I can't actually remember when I knew, but I've had a file named Vasek for, years. And yeah, all those sort of notes in there. So it wasn't difficult. She appeared, and I knew it was right. So even though she wasn't in the books as yet, she was in my head. So she was living already.
All right, I'm just so incredibly in awe of you. 7 years ago you wrote that. Anyway, he's such an interesting character, of course, because, when we first meet him, he's seemingly ice cold and unfeeling, and yet, he's horrified in Heart of Obsidian by the deaths at the Human Alliance force at the school, and Heart of Obsidian was real swoon material, by the way, and he has a real friendship with Aiden, even though he might not recognise that. So there's always been that kernel of good, if you like, for a man who thinks he's not good.
I think the interesting thing about Vasek is that he is, as you say, very dark. He's got, he's an assassin, an arrow, but he also has a very deep vulnerability, which I don't think he's aware of. But that's Aiden in the book. He says the reason the two of them became friends is the same reason that Vasek should have never been an arrow, because he has a capacity to care on an extremely deep level, and the capacity to be incredibly loyal and incredibly protective. And all of these things were just, used in the wrong way by the arrows, or the people who used him, because the arrows themselves are not bad people. They want to do what is best for their society. But the leadership they had, Ming was at the helm for a long time, and he used them in ways that really was a betrayal of that loyalty. And so, yeah, Vasek was a really, really interesting character to write, because he is one of those characters where, the still waters run deep. And so the challenge with Vasek was to get beneath, find out who he is, and yeah, so I won't say too much more, because I don't want to spoil it for the book for readers. But he is, I think, as you go along, his journey is incredible, and I just loved spending time with him and with Ivy, and they're great characters. But I say that about all my characters, so really I'm totally biased.
Well, I can't wait to meet Ivy and see him get some of the happiness that he deserves. He's done a lot of good, even if he only thinks about the blood on his hands. Before I move off the wonderful Shield of Winter, are there any last-minute teasers that you want to throw out to our viewers? The book's out in not very long.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, chapter 2, I'm going to be posting the entirety of chapter 2 in, I think, a couple of weeks. So they'll get that. And, well, look, I have the arc here. Shall I just randomly open it to a page?
Please.
Okay, here we go. Actually, I can't figure out what to tell you now. There's all sorts of interesting things in this book. I just opened this page, and it's all about Caleb and Lucas. And they're in the same scene together, so that's something else you have to look forward to. There's this is a book that brings together a lot of the characters. We're going to see the Snow Dancers, the Dark River Pack, Caleb and Sahara again, but it is heavily focused on the Psy because of, I think if you're reading the series, you know the story arc has been very defined. And it's something I wanted to do from the start. So this is getting to, I guess, the end of the original arc, and it's got to be the Psy, because, silence has been such a big deal. And then with what happened in Heart of Obsidian, now this book is the aftermath. Because in Heart of Obsidian, it happened, but then what next? I'll read you a line from actually from the prologue, because it says, for though silence was a deeply flawed construct, it existed for a reason. And so this book is like, well, what do we do now? So
They've cast adrift, haven't they, really?
Yeah.
And, of course, all the arrows, as you say, were not only used abominably, but they were lied to. They were made to believe that they were flawed and this was the only thing they could look forward to.
Yeah. So there was a lot of betrayal that happened, to the squad by their leadership. But at the same time, they are all incredibly loyal to one another. And, that is kind of their defining, how do you say it? It's what defines them. And I think perhaps it's going to be what saves them, because that loyalty, it's keeping them anchored. It's what's keeping Vasek anchored when otherwise, there's really nothing that would hold him here.
No, that's...
Yeah.
Now, I apologise if I get her name wrong, but Marisha Mara from Brazil has written in. She wanted me to tell you that you have many, many fans in Brazil. Her question was, it's a two-part question. What she'd really like to know is, in the Psy Changeling series, do you have a favourite character? Now, that's a loaded question. And if not, do you prefer the wolves or the leopards?
Oh, I honestly can't answer either of those, because, as I said, I really, really love all my characters. Even the evil ones, because they're, without them, without the darkness, you couldn't see the light. And so they're all fascinating for me to write, character-wise. I honestly could not choose. I know sometimes, actually I heard another author say this, and she said, whoever I'm writing at the moment, whoever's book I'm writing, they are my favorite. And I thought, you know what, that's true, because you have to be so absorbed in the story. So when I was writing Vasek and Ivy's story, that was it. They were my total focus. They were my absolute favorites. And it was the same when I was writing Heart of Obsidian. It was Caleb and Sahara, and then back to Slave to Sensation, it was Lucas and Sasha. So I think that's actually quite a good answer, because it's true. Because as a writer, I live these characters. They live in my head 24/7 when I'm writing the book. So I guess my favorites change, but I love them all. As for whether I prefer Dark River to Snowdancer, I think, you know what, I can't choose. They're so different. Even though they're both predators, they're so unique, each of them. And so really, I can't give you an answer. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm sure Marissa's had probably worked that one out herself, but worth asking. Now, the next question I have is from my friend Pernilla in Sweden. She says, when a child is born to the Psy Changeling couple, is it going to have both sets of powers, or is it a toss of the coin, genetics, or, is one more genetically dominant than the other? And then the same question in relation to a human Psy or human Changeling baby.
Yeah, it's just genetics. So changeling genes are generally dominant, or they are dominant. So if there is a changeling has a baby with either a human or a Psi, the baby will shift because one parent is changeling. As you get further down, for example, if that child then has a child with a human or a Psi, then it's cut down. The percentage is cut down. But if they inherit the changeling gene, that shifting gene, they will shift. You only need one to shift, or like it's a dominant. And in terms of psi abilities, they can exist alongside. So, for example, if you're changeling, it doesn't mean you couldn't also have psi abilities. And the same with humans. If a human, with the Forgotten, we see this with the Forgotten. The Forgotten are have a lot of humans who intermated with changelings, with Psi, and they have abilities. But again, it's genetics, so that's how I wrote it. So some of them now no longer have any powers because the genetics have, they've changed. They've just constantly married maybe humans or had children with humans, and then so they've become more human. And on the other side, there's the genes that have, two Forgotten might have got together, and then if their genes add up right, they're going to have a very strong, psychically powerful child because they're both carrying the Psi genes. So, I tried to write it in that way. It's very scientific, I think, makes logical sense. So for example, Sasha and Lucas's child will shift because one parent is a shifter or a changeling, but she will also have very likely, psi abilities.
Okay, thank you. Now, are Taiwan the Rat Alpha, or perhaps Adam of the Hawks, going to get a story once you finish the Wolves and Leopards stories?
The Windhaven Alpha, the Falcon, Adam, yes. I have always wanted to write about him from the start. Tejan, that's how I say it, the name. He's interesting because obviously he's a rat changeling, and I like him. I really like him. But I never thought he would, become such a fan favorite because obviously he's a rat changeling. And so it's been interesting. He does have quite a fan club. So I think eventually, he will get some kind of story. I don't know if he'll get, a novella, or what I might do is actually put it into the storyline of the books themselves. It just depends. It's not going to be part, I think, of this final arc of, the main arc that's been going on from book 1. But in the next part of the stories that I want to tell, I think so. Yeah. So, I guess the answer is I'm not going to leave him hanging. Poor Tejan, he's just not going to be left hanging. So, and I know in one of the books, he's on a date when someone calls him, and so, he's out there. He's quite a smooth, kind of guy. He's a bit of a player, but there'll be someone.
Oh, that's good. He's also quite integral to the information flow, so I think people have really liked the fact that he's saved the bacon of the wolves and the leopards a time or two with that.
Yeah, I think the rats are quite interesting characters to write because they do have a strong role to play in the series as well, and yet at the same time that role is in the background because that's what they do. They don't come to the foreground. And so, yeah, they're quite interesting to write about.
Now, the next question, again from Pernilla in Sweden, are the net mind and the dark mind, which are the dual sentient mind entities the net's created, ever going to become corporeal or in any way, or will they start influencing characters on a more deep level, apart from the madness that the black spots have caused throughout the net, of course?
They are psychic creations, and the fact is that they are in their terms, they're actually quite young. So there's no way to know what will happen with them. I think in Shield of Winter, again, you get a deeper look at them again, because we are in the Psy world, we're in the Psynet. So yeah, for now, I'm just going to say just watch, see what happens, and see where they go.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll leave the Psy and get onto the Guild Hunter series.
Okay.
With the 3 races in Psy Changeling series, all coming from the kind of the same human stock way back when, how would you explain how the genome split into the Psy, the human, and the changelings? Was there some kind of just general evolution? Was it regular mutation, or was it forced on them? How did it all through?
I think for me, I see it as a natural evolution. At some stage, they simply branched off. And, you know, eventually it got to a point where they were 3 distinct races. But they are the same species. And I deliberately use the word races to describe them because they are the same species. They come from the same stock. They can intermarry and have, you know, intermate and have children together. So, you know, that... so there's no issues like that. For me, it's simply that they simply branched off at some stage far, far back in the past.
Great. Okay, moving on to the Guild Hunter or Archangel series. Shanpreet Singh has sent in a question asking, how many more books do you foresee or are you contracted for in the Guild Hunter series?
I'm contracted up to book 8, so I'm writing book 7 right now, Archangel Shadows, and then I'm contracted up to book another one. I find it difficult to answer the question of how many books. I tend to think in terms of the story. When the story is done, the series is done, you know. So I think after book 8 there will be more books, but I'm not sure how many. And the Guild Hunter series will be shorter than the Psy Changeling series for the simple reason that there is a much smaller cast. A core cast. I don't sort of foresee myself going outside that really, you know, the core cast, which is basically Elena and Raphael, the 7, and you know, the people in the guild that we know, basically, and the cadre of 10, of course. But so the cast is small. You know, in the Psy Changing series, it's a much more sprawling cast, and so there's a lot more opportunities for spin-off type stories. So like we could go off into, like, you know, the Falcons, explore their how they live and everything like that. I don't necessarily want to do that with the Guild Hunters. I want to stay very, very focused, and so as a result it will be shorter. It's hard for me to say just off the top of my head how many books, but you know, definitely we're going to have to see the stories of all the 7. I don't think I could just sort of leave that hanging. I feel it wouldn't be complete, the series, if we did that. So you know, there's a few of them left, and there's going to be at least one more Elena Raphael book. So yeah, so you know, a few more years yet. Yeah.
Yay! What made you set both of your series mainly in the US?
Actually, it's the same answer for both of them, which is that I needed a really big canvas. So, for example, with the Psy Changeling series, I needed a place that had cities, that had mountains, rivers, forests, and that was huge, so that when we talked about political power, you know, it would be immediate. We would understand. So California is massive, and in the series, Snowdancer controls most of California. And so when you put that, you know, when you put that in a book, it's immediate. Okay, these guys are our power. A lot of people say, why didn't you set it in New Zealand? Because, you know, it's such a beautiful place. The thing is, New Zealand can fit inside California probably a couple of times. It's tiny. I don't think people realize how tiny it is. And so there's just not that impact. You know, if a New Zealand politician kind of says something, it's kind of not world news. So it's just, yeah, and I needed that massive canvas because the stories I was telling, you know, had to do with the world. You know, this is a world in flux, and so I needed somewhere really central and with all the the environmental factors I mentioned, and also distances, so that I needed massive distances that they could go and run and everything. And I had actually been traveling in California right before I started writing Slave to Sensation, and it just all clicked, and I knew it was perfect. I didn't even really think about it. I just started writing, and that's where it was. With the Guild Hunter series, it was pretty much the same thing. These are archangels. They rule, different territories, and I wanted a really central location for the main, the main archangel I would be having in the series, which was Raphael. And I love New York, and it was just perfect. When I first had the idea of the series, I saw this archangel in a tower in New York, and I mean that was the visual that started the entire series. And so it was a no-brainer. It was just, oh, that's where it's meant to be. And the energy of New York really, really fits the series. I think, if you read the books, you can see that, with Elena, who she is, she is such a New Yorker. And, so it was just, I guess, a natural thing. It was a natural thing, but driven by the needs of the story.
Okay. Now, later this year, and I'm hanging out, we'll see the release of Archangel Shadows, giving us Janvier and Ashwini's long and eagerly awaited story. Was it fun to write? There's such a repartee, between them that I find myself smiling or laughing out loud pretty much at every meeting of them.
It's been fun. It's they're still, they are still funny and witty and sharp. But with this book, we get to see inside them as well, and so it's deeply emotional as well. I've just finished, actually, like 10 minutes before we came online. I just finished editing one of the most powerful emotional scenes in the book. But even with that, they are still, their personalities are still unique. They are they deal with things by laughing about it, and so you see that, they're not. It's not like Janvier is going to be like a tormented, dark alpha hero now. He is who he has always been. He's flirtatious. He's quite funny. He's quite witty, and he adores her, really. So with them, the issue has never been the attraction. There's something else, underneath that has been keeping them apart. So it was fun. I mean, really, these two have been hanging out for a while, so it was time they got their story. And so it's been really good. And also, this book, again, it's a kind of an aftermath book, if you think about what happened in Archangel's Legion. So we actually get to see quite a lot of Elena and Raphael as well. We see Dimitri. Nasir is back. He's quite of a scene stealer, that guy. And and we see several other people. So it is their book. It's Ashwini and Janvier's book, but it's very much within the Guild Hunter group of characters that we know. So it's not isolated. They're very much in the heart of New York. Everything's intertwined. There's this one scene which I really love, and it's a dinner party, and it's basically the most awesome dinner party ever, because it's it's like Elaine and Raphael and the Seven and Ashwini and Janvier, and it's really, really fun. And I think readers can look forward to getting their story, but also getting to catch up with their favorite characters.
Because, of course, one of the things Ashwini seems to love about Janvier is the fact that when she's with him, all of her demons are quiet.
Yes, and yes, it's true. And also, she lives with him. It's he makes her come alive. There's no darkness there when she's with him, and she loves that. But again, they have been playing for a long time. So in this book, things kind of come to a head. It's like, well, what's going on? Why haven't they, as many people have said, why haven't they done the sort of horizontal mambo? and got in together. And then, you know, you find out that it's not just for no reason. There is a, you know, a reason behind it. And, you know, oh, I don't want to be all spoilery, but it's quite emotional, you know, it's heartbreaking. But yeah, but, you know, so yeah, we'll see how they do. But they're very strong characters as well. I think sometimes when we see characters who are, you know, funny or amusing or take things lightly, we think they're not strong, but they are very strong. They just happen to handle it in this other way. So yeah, it's been really fun, and I've actually been learning some Cajun French for the book as well, getting some help, and so you'll get a bit of that in the book as well.
Excellent. Well, speaking of how you pronounce things, my next question, my friends and I have been dying to ask you how we say, is it Aiden, is it Odin?
Well, there are different ways people say it. My favorite way to say it is Arden.
Well, then that's how it is. It's Arden.
It's Arden. Yeah. But I know some people like Aiden, but I always liked Arden. And yeah. So yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Alrighty. Now, apart from the fact that, you know, you say the next book will come and we'll go have Elena and Raphael, are any of the main 7 that haven't been covered yet yelling at you to write their story next?
Not at this stage, because I'm still very much into this book. And what happens usually is I'll write the book, and I'm always making notes about the other characters in different files. And usually when I finish a book, I'll, you know, I kind of let it just simmer, and I'm usually working on the next book in the other series at that point. So after this book, I'll start writing Changeling 14. And usually that's when things sort of bubble up, and I'll be like, oh, that's what I'm meant to be writing about next. So even though I kind of know the storyline, you know, across the series in terms of who kind of comes into center stage with each book, that's more fluid. And I am starting to sort of get an idea in this book, but I usually don't talk about it until I'm certain, because it can change. And so I don't want people to be disappointed when I say it's going to be so-and-so, and then I'm like, oh, no, actually, I lied. So give me a few more months, and then I can tell you.
Fair enough. I think, you know, that's writer's prerogative, author's prerogative. So I'm hoping our viewers have enjoyed the delving into the Changeling and the Guild Hunter world. Now, I'd like to move to just some general questions about you, Nalini, and perhaps what's in the future. Carly Griffin, who is also an author, asks, are there any new paranormal romance series in the works beyond the Guild Hunters and the Changelings that you're planning? And can you give any hints on what they might be if, in fact, you are planning them?
Well, I have a couple of things that I'm working on. There is one book which I'm not sure would be a series, but it's an idea for a book I have. So just watch this space.
Absolutely. Now, Prasantha Madurai asks, who was your favourite author growing up?
Who was my favourite author growing up? Ooh, that's a really difficult question, because I was like the quintessential bookworm. I went to the library and I would walk out with like this many pile of books. Gosh, you know, really, I read everyone. I've read everything from Nancy Drew to the Hardy Boys to Dickens to, you know, Anne McCaffrey to just Mercedes Lackey, everyone. And then obviously as I got older, I started to get into the Mills and Boons, and I sort of just raced through those. And I've read, you know, all the classics. So really, I can't give you a favorite. Just trying to think, but no, too hard. Way too hard.
It is a difficult question. Carly Griffin also wanted to know, what sorts of activities and hobbies do you like to pursue in your downtime or between writing books?
Well, I love to read. I still love to read. So usually when I'm this deep into a book, like I'm writing Archangel Shadows now, I tend not to read. What I do is I will just hoard all my books, and then when I finish the book, I just kind of binge read, like, you know, read 5 or 6 books in a row. But and aside from that, I love to travel. So that's kind of like my big hobby, I guess, because I save time through the year and then I take off and go visit, different places. Last year I went to Morocco, which was fantastic. This year I'll be, in Europe, and there's a few other places I'd like to go, in the States as well. But in summer when I'm at home, I have been known to garden. I do like my flower garden. But the interesting thing is, for me, writing started out as a hobby, and so now I do it full time. But I love it still. So sometimes my hobby is writing still. I go on vacation and I last about 3 days, and then I have to write something. So I guess my number one hobby is still writing. Is that sad?
This means you're more prolific for us. We can't really complain about that. Now, Kyle Griffin wants to know, what are some of the things left on your bucket list? Do you have a bucket list?
Ooh, I don't really have a bucket list. I guess it's more like all the places I want to travel. That's what I'd like to do. Like, I'd like to go to South America and go to the jungles there and, do a safari in Africa and go to Antarctica and all those kinds of things. So I guess, yeah, for me it's all about seeing as much of the world and having really interesting experiences.
Pernilla asks, have any movie or TV companies ever approached you about making your books into movies or audiovisual stories, or, has that not happened yet?
We've had a few nibbles, but the thing with movies and TV is it's, really, really difficult to actually get anything off the ground. So I tend not to get too excited when it happens. It's like, oh, that's nice. And then I always say, unless it's signed in blood in triplicate, it didn't happen. So yeah. So yeah, we've had a few approaches, but nothing's panned out. So yeah.
Now, this is my last question, and I often throw this in towards the end of an interview. If you could invite 5 people to dinner at your house, who would they be and why?
Oh my goodness. This is the kind of question I could sit there for hours thinking and thinking and thinking.
Go with your gut.
Go with my gut, eh? Can I invite fictional characters?
Absolutely, whoever you would like.
Okay, well, I think Jane Austen. I would like to have her at my table. I think she would have been quite an interesting person to know. I would invite. See, now my brain's gone in the Austen way, so all I'm thinking are Austen things. But I'm gonna break out. I would invite Shah Rukh Khan, who is a big Bollywood movie star, because I think he's really interesting. Who else would I invite? Gosh, Nora Roberts, because she's so fascinating and so intelligent, and I would just love to hear her talk.
Sorry.
You're going to have this whole video of me sitting here going, Well, if we get to my characters, I'm going to just fill the whole room with them because I would just love to hang out with them. So we'll just set that aside for now. And, oh gosh, I'm just trying to think who else. I think, from the Anne McCaffrey books, the Master Harper of Pern, I think he would be, such a cool person to have actually met, and the stories he could tell.
That's Robin.
Pardon?
Robinson?
Robinson, yes. And, gosh, after we finish this conversation, I'm going to have like 10 other people I could tell you. So, who else? How many people have I said? 4?
I've got 4.
I've got 4. I've got one more. Oh my God, the pressure, the pressure. Okay, let me see.
I won't force you to it if you really don't want to.
Well, I can't think of anyone now because I think of people, but I think of more than one. So, for example, I think I would love to have, Eve and Rourke from the J.D. Robb books, or if it was the Austen books, I would actually have Captain Wentworth and Anne, because I would just love to know what's going on and what happened with their life after the end of Persuasion. So yeah, my dinner table is getting bigger and bigger. I think you should have warned me for this question. I would have spent like 2 hours like going through all my people, but we'll just stop there.
That's why I don't warn people. Mean of me, I know. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. For those of our viewers who haven't yet taken the time to sign up for Nalini's newsletter or visit her website, can I suggest you do it pronto? We often get free short stories, access to deleted scenes, and tempting tidbits about upcoming stories, not to mention those new release dates we all hang out for. So after you've watched this chat, please do go to www.nalinisingh.com and catch up on everything you've missed. If you're an aspiring writer, Nalini even has a section for you on her website with FAQs and articles to inspire you. She has a Twitter handle, @Nalini Singh, or a Facebook page, so you can interact with Nalini on many levels in many different ways, whatever suits you, but all of those offers are there for you. Have I missed any, Nalini?
No, that's it. I think definitely, join my newsletter. It's the best way to make sure you get information directly into your inbox. And I always do try to put something, fun in there for you. And, we won't spam you. I'm like, it's like once a month, except, I take off on vacation for Christmas, so there's usually not one there. Yeah.
Alrighty. Nalini, that brings us to the end of this chat for ARRA. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today and sharing some of your history, as well as news about upcoming books. I look forward to reading Shield of Winter in a couple of months and, of course, Archangel's Shadows later in the year. Thank you for writing such wonderful stories and giving us such wonderful worlds to lose ourselves in. And wanted to wish you all the best while you go back in that writing cave for those last bits of editing.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you and good night.